So I'm a little bit early, but I think today is one of those days that I want to do this because so I'm minimalizing the amount of hold on a second, let me just untangle this. I have to use two mics because I'm on two different formats. One is the vertical, the other is the landscape, because one of them I'm able to use to whatchamacallit, to edit, whereas the other one is not as easy when you're trying to edit a video. Oops, yeah, as expected, it was slightly crooked. Okay, so I'm coming on here because, I mean, A, I like doing discussions on channels, and B, because, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to minimize the shorts. I think the shorts are just getting in the way of what I'm trying to do on a practical scale on YouTube and use it as research and resource material, right? So I think that's my biggest concern right now, is that it feels like it's a little stagnant, because I'm not putting up with the movements that obviously I think YouTube prefers people being frustrated and angry and argumentative, and I just don't. For me, that is not healthy. That is a very unhealthy state of mind, and I don't think it helps with productivity. As somebody who has done lots of art and lots of shows, I know the best time to work and to analyze things is when the space is quiet, which is why I'm sort of, oh gosh, it's all over the place right now, which is why I'm sort of doing this. Sorry, I have to detangle. But yeah, so I wanted to walk through a couple of historical art figures, not just in the arts, but also music and video. And I think my series now is going to be based off of visible creators that have made a pathway beyond just being a famous, recognized person. And as I discussed before, the creative art scene was about creative artists moving from different countries to other countries and so forth and so on. Welcome in. I'm detangling. I'm having a little bit of a tangling issue here with my other mic. I have two segments. How are you? I'm glad everybody's doing a great or having a great day today. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the artists and the creative scene of where this concept of nomadics and the global diaspora come from. Before I do that, I sort of wanted to discuss how I've created various platforms. I haven't just, and I understand how TikTok works, but I personally don't use TikTok anymore, and I've done the lives and all that stuff, and it just wasn't, I don't know. I just, for me, it was just too much over engagement, and I literally just stopped because it was just driving me up the wall. The same thing applied for Facebook, and I literally just stopped. I was like, I'm done. I'm 46 years old. I don't have to play this silly game. So I'm on here trying to be a little bit more methodical on how I utilize social media now, because I don't see social media as just entertainment, right? I think a lot of people assume that entertainment is what the goal is, or the initial plan for the platform, but because I had done my master's and I had done my bachelor's and I've done studies abroad in different countries during high school and junior high and elementary school, I just don't see it the same way. And obviously, being a Gen Xer, you see things a little bit differently. I like my little plushes, but when I moved back to the States, I didn't have anything. I literally came with a backpack, my certificates, maybe some clothing, but I had to start over again. So all the stuff you see here is me leaving the country that I was living in, which was South Africa, where my parents have a house, My sister has a house, and everything is like there because when they moved from the American embassy, they took everything from the United States and sent it over to South Africa, and now everything is over there. So when I moved back, I came with nothing. Nothing. I was like literally traveling with nothing. So all the stuff you see now is new concept, new things, because all the old stuff that my parents have in their house, I was not prepared to bring back with me. So I'm starting over like everybody else is, right? So that's first and foremost of how my global content comes in, is I'm not starting with a house. I'm starting with everything that I have carried along the way and the work that I've established through the process. We don't own this place. This place is rented. Okay, so that's like a whole nother subject. Right, okay. So going back into the context of what I could carry, I was able to get onto the internet and learn how to develop my own sites before social media became like this huge thing. And for me, that was like my saving grace. Okay, sorry, I have something in my voice. 2 seconds. Let me just take this out so it's not irritating. So what I was able to carry back was everything that I had put together on the internet from the website I developed. Sorry, if you don't know me, my name is Cinta. I know that on most occasions, a lot of the people that come onto the lives are not necessarily people that know me from the channel. So welcome in if you don't know me. Welcome in if you do know me. My name is Cinta. That's an Indonesian name. It's not even Spanish. It's Indonesian. I'm part Asian because of my mom's mixed background from South Africa and my dad's Jewish background from the United States. Okay, so there's like that. And I was just talking about my trip back to the United States, leaving South Africa in 2000 and, I think it was 2013. I moved back to the States, but before that I was in university for my bachelor's and graduated in 2002 or 2001, and then from there went straight to South Africa to join my parents, which is where they decided to retire from the US Embassy. So I was just bringing up that movement of having to move again without a house, without clothing, without all of the things and the essentials that you need to survive a normal life. You have to start over again, right? So I've experienced that starting over again maybe about 5 or 6 times already. So this is what you're seeing now, is a person who has gone through this so many times that she doesn't even like count the times she had to start over again. But myself being the person, starting over again also meant understanding, learning new skills and new understanding of how technology worked. Luckily, I had skills in technology because I worked in the embassy and I worked in different places with music, and music production was also part of the process. I was talking about that mainly because I thought it was important to identify why on one of my videos I brought up that I have personally saved $100,000 creating my own business structure. I saved, I didn't pay out. Meaning when I was making and developing the projects, I didn't think about hiring people. I learned the skills to create these particular formats so I could save money and I didn't have to spend money on hiring people to do it for me. So I think that's where I wanted to start today, is I wanted to just explain how obviously, you know, if you go into the internet, you can actually learn the costs. Let's just talk about video production and editing. I do that myself. Generally, people would hire somebody to do video and editing if you were a larger industry guru. They would charge about 300 videos at 100. So if you're creating 300 videos, it would be like $100, right? Music production, since I do that myself and I built my own equipment and put it together, I am now saving on worrying about copyright restrictions, because I do that myself. I'm basically saving about 10 to 20, 25,000 depending on, so I don't need to worry about this. All of these things, this is why I think it's important for people to understand that having those qualified skills or learning the skills, you don't even need to get a qualification. Learn the skills, implement those skills into your business structure. Say, for instance, you're looking for a job and you can't find a job right now. This is how you build yourself up. You don't wait for somebody to give you something. I've learned a long time ago when I moved back to the States, I wasn't expecting anybody to give me a job. I had to go out and apply for jobs, right? Give them what I had, which were the resumes. We didn't have AI to help with the resumes. I had to backtrack and remember all the jobs that I had, which I already have on my resume, which is over tons of stuff from 2001. Okay, so my channel is not, it's a historical referenced environment, okay? So I'm bringing these up because all of these creative artists that I'm going to talk about had their own restraints and restrictions of moving to different countries and having to resolve issues in their mind, and they didn't have social media or the internet back then. So it was very hard for them to make movement, and obviously every one of them must have had skills, right, to develop their own structural lifestyle and format. I was going to talk about Yoko Ono. I was going to bring up a little bit about Georgia Okeefe, Frieda Karol, Yoko Ono, Yayoi Kusumi? Is that how you, yeah, Kusuma. Yayoi Kusuma. I was also going to bring up a videographer even before their time or during the same time, whose name was a Korean guy, a Korean creator, which was, I don't know, June Paik. I only just recently learned about June Paik, which I should have known, but I didn't actually know. So I was a little shocked to know that this was a creative videographer who saw changes when television first came out to develop what we now have as like social media, I guess, right? He had seen and envisioned all these things happen during the 1970s before it happened, and created concepts from like a Dada impressionistic approach to things. I have a video on how AI is the next level to the arts, fine arts. We're not talking about the music side. The music side I have questions about, but the visual arts, when you're using, I see it a little bit differently. I think visual arts, visually, as an artist who creates visual art work, I feel like I have an allergy to paint. I have to make sure that I use things that are not paint related, because I break out into horrible hives. That's a lot of the reasons why I don't wear makeup either, because makeup also creates, it's actually bad for your skin. So I might not look 46 because I don't wear that much makeup. I don't wear base, I don't wear foundation, I wear eyeliner and a little bit of eyeshadow, and that's it. I don't wear perfumes. The only cream I use is Nivea, okay? So knowing that I have skin allergies has made me think about what materials and mediums I can use as an individual that will not have me restricted from skin issues. That's my biggest problem, is that I have skin issues. I can't even do, like, if I were to do, like, if I did TikTok projects that I had people invite me to do and discuss, like, these, like, health things and sprays, I have to decline because those are the things that I would be highly allergic to. So this is the kind of stuff that I separate myself from. Okay, so there are some artists that have issues with certain mediums. So I'm one of those artists that has issues with certain mediums. I do create art with textiles. I do create art with watercolor, but I do create art with paper. This is one of my pieces below here. This is also my work. This is soundproofing, which is nothing hard to do, but you get like a panels and you create the panels and then you stretch the material over the panels depending on the situation. So there's certain things I can do and certain things I can't do. Okay, so let's go back into the discussion. And thus, what you're seeing right now, what you're seeing me talking about right now, I'm using this for my series. Okay, so what you're seeing here is the series format. I have the vertical and I also have the landscape, but I'm able to do both because I think the conversation is valid on both spectrums. I'm not wasting my time. I'm being wise about how I utilize the space, the time, the environment, and the equipment, right? The equipment. So going back into the artist June Paik, I also bring him up because the very recognized musician Ryuichi Sakamoto for me was like a big influence when I lived in Japan. And I only noticed and realized that he had all these like recognized award-winning movies he had done maybe much later on in my life. And I only just found out that June Paik and Ryuichi Sakamoto, June Paik was from Korea and he moved to Tokyo, which is how he ended up meeting Ryuichi Sakamoto, and they interlocked with projects. So Ryuichi was a music producer. He probably also did modeling for people in the fashion. And then you also have the film and editing, which is where June Paik came from. So if you don't know, there is a section on my community section of a video of June Paik. If you're interested to see what it is, feel free to take a look. Very interesting because he inspired the development of social media and communication on a television, but on a screen before all of this stuff existed. He used tapes and cassette players and all of these things to create the imagery that he and we now know as social media. Okay, so he's actually quite an important artist that I did not know about, which is a shock to me because I thought I knew like most of them, but apparently I missed one, and he was a very important one who I indeed missed, who actually interconnected the world and my idol, who is Ryuichi Sakamoto. Okay, so I really look up to that guy. He's like, as a child, I just listened to his music and it was like this huge thing for me. Okay, so moving into the next phase, we have, even before that, I have a quick story about my experience meeting Paul McCartney at my college, at the university that I went to. So Paul McCartney, even before that, my dad was involved with, you know, Graceland. If you don't know Paul Simon, okay, my dad, because he was part of the embassy and the cultural attaché during the time in the 80s in South Africa, and Graceland was the first experience, I think, Paul Simon came over to South Africa. I remember meeting Paul Simon at my parents' house, not knowing who he was. I was like, who's this guy? Why is he in our living room? And why is he chatting up my parents? What's going on here? So Paul Simon was invited, I think from the embassy, from the American embassy. My dad happened to be the one to help get him, you know, introduced and directed and organized and, you know, all that kind of stuff for what he did. So I had met Paul Simon when I was in like Pretoria, South Africa, when I must have been all of 8 or 9. I think Graceland happened in 1980 something. So you can just, that kind of pinpoints how old I am. So that was my first experience meeting, not really, I met some other people along the way, but Paul Simon, this will add into the story as to what actually happened when I met Paul McCartney. But when I was in the Corcoran for our last year, so we were in the last year of our university. We had our final exam, the hemicycle at the Corcoran. And here comes Paul McCartney walking up the staircase to the hemicycle, because I think Paul McCartney was there to look at a museum space for his paintings, because Paul McCartney was known for it's not just known for being the Beatles, but he also one of the Beatles, but he also paints. Like, I only realized that he was actually a painter and why he ended up at the Corcoran to look at the space and environment for maybe his own exhibition. I don't know in the end if he had the show, but he was there, and he walked into our final examination, and here I am. I don't know if I was like tired, but I called him Paul Simon, and I'm sure it shocked him completely, because I don't think anybody calls him Paul Simon. You cannot miss. Paul McCartney and Paul Simon are two very different characters, but they are around the same age, right? They're around the same age, and their time period is about correct. So Paul Simon I met in South Africa, and in my parents' place, and Paul McCartney I met at the Corcoran. And I still have pictures of the show he walked into. You can even reference it. You can check when did Paul McCartney head on down to the Corcoran, and it's on the internet and will tell you, like, this is when it was, like 2001, 2002. So it's not like I'm making this stuff up. This stuff is like legitimately online, right? Okay, let me go into, it was our show for that particular exhibition was to do with the 9/11, because 9/11 happened during that time. I remember I was in college, 9/11 happened, and everybody was told to sit and watch the television, and we were like, what is going on? And sure enough, all these things are happening in New York, and I had some friends leave the classroom and head on down to New York to take these photographs of everything falling from the sky, which was quite amazing. So that documentary and research was actually, not even research, but the real life situation actually was documented from my colleagues in the Corcoran. So just after 9/11 was when we had our final examination, but the topic of this show dealt heavily on the 9/11 kind of concept, right? So this was 2001, and this was the show. I don't have pictures of Paul McCartney because we don't take photographs of celebrities. It's just not one of the things we do, right? But I can show you on here. I don't know if you can see it. It was a very interesting show. This is one section of it. So there were a lot of students that had paintings on the walls. Each person had their own kind of element. But I decided to use the center space in the ceiling for like garments that I created, and then a painting on the floor, and then a performance piece for this particular project. So it was a very interesting moment. But as I said, Paul McCartney actually was we didn't go to a show. Paul McCartney walked into our show, which was not for us, but I think it was to check out the space for him to possibly do his own exhibition. So it's just the irony of me calling him Paul Simon, even though I'd met Paul Simon separately, and still called Paul McCartney Paul Simon was like unheard of. Like, who in their right minds would do that? Well, I did because of the whole situation. So that's to solve that problem. Going into the Beatles, now we go into the subject of Yoko Ono. And performance is what she does, right? Performance arts. And she has a history. Yoko Ono came from Japan, I think from the 70s, and then moved to New York, right? And her time she had like also a rough story. So it just shows where everything went south and the misunderstanding, and then success came out of the misunderstanding. Sorry. Cat fluff. And I think, let me just put this over here. So that's the show that this is when Paul McCartney walked into our exhibition, okay, at the Corcoran. You can always look it up on the internet. You could say, find out when was Paul McCartney at the Corcoran in DC, and then it will tell you 2000 and something. So it's there. I just documented it, basically. And this is what saved me when I moved to different countries. This was having my own documentation and putting together my own projects and shows. I was able to have enough stuff to make my own websites. So I have like 2 websites right now, but this WordPress one was the first one, and then SoundCloud was the first one I generally put together for my reference. Because when you travel to different countries, you don't always have, like, you need to have proof of something. So my proof was on the internet already, so I didn't have to panic about, like, looking for the stuff. Okay, so Yoko Ono is known. I don't have images of her, but I can. And we cannot use other people's contexts or documentation or pictures or imagery, because that would be considered copyright problems, which is why I'm talking through it. And sometimes I will use AI to recreate the concept, because it's the safest way to keep yourself on social media safe, is that you don't do those copy, because it's pretty serious. When people find out that you're using somebody else's information, your books, your pages, your books, your research, whatever, can be removed. The same thing happens with the masters. If you don't use the footnotes, and you don't have the proof of research documentation when you do your master's, and you don't have any proof, then it is not considered research. It's not proper research, and then you cannot pass whatever it is that you're supposed to be passing. Okay, so that is why documentation, researching overall, no matter what you do, is so important. If you don't have documentation documented right now, I recommend starting right now and start documenting your process, because that in the end will save you in the headaches and pains and anxiety and stresses in the near future. So that's where I'm coming from, okay? So Yoko Ono was also, and I say, when I said Paul Simon over Paul McCartney, that's a form of Dadaism, right? Not as if it was something I thought about at the time, but it was definitely a very starstruck moment, which is a performance piece in itself. Like, everybody talks about being starstruck, but the ideal concept of being starstruck is like sort of an invisible kind of concept, right? So that leads into this whole thing of how Yoko Ono's artwork wasn't just performance art and singing, and the uncomfort of people in the West not understanding her vocal range. Her vocal range was actually very Japanese, very traditional Japanese trained vocal ranges, but she did not use Japanese singing, technically speaking, in her performances. She basically utilized the sounds and the vowels and the interpretations of how the vocal cords are used to perform in Japanese kabuki and traditional singing in Japan, because when I lived in Japan, I did obonodori, which is Japanese dancing, and I remember I had to dance to traditional Japanese music. And I recognized the sound in Yoko Ono's voice as very Japanese in traditional Japanese singing. Okay, so the misinterpretation of what Yoko Ono was doing, and it's a very cultural misunderstanding of how the West interpreted her over what she was really doing. She was actually good at, and she studied the arts. So she was like just borderline of when Dadaism came about, and you had Duchamp and Salvador Dali, who was like kind of just after, and a few other artists, and you had, they were all connected. Andy Warhol was more pop. So they all came from that group of creative forces, but they were always trying to break the boundaries, break what the West perceived as what you should do and what the society of the arts expected you to do, versus the interpretation of a new vision, a new change, a change of restrictions that they were trying to break. So I think Yoko Ono broke those boundaries, and because of breaking boundaries and idealistic approaches to what a female was recognized for, could do, versus what people could not do. You know, a lot of women back then we were not really allowed to be strong, powerful, engaged, creative beings because it was a male-dominated environment, just like the music, the male-dominant environment. So she broke that boundary and became this real ultimate feminist, which was a really good thing because it kind of broke the boundaries for other females to come along and do similar things or break those boundaries in different ways with performance pieces too. So there's Yoko Ono. She was also blamed for, as we know, for the Beatles' breakup. And I don't think that, even myself, I do not believe that that was the case. I think that there was more going on in the situation that people were not seeing. It's just the general public saw it in one way and kept that perspective, and it was unfair to her. And I think that that is what the common denominator of society is, that people perceive things one way, but it might not necessarily be how it is. The story of the person, of the individual, hearing the story from the individual is one thing, and perceiving the idea of their own perspective is another misunderstood interpretation, right? So that's it. Then we have the artist, I think during that time, even before that, we have Giorgio Okeefe and Frieda Kahlo. Now, Frieda Kahlo, we know, everybody knows Frieda Kahlo, but she moved from Mexico, I think, all the way from between Mexico and New York. And I think Giorgio Okeefe and Frieda Kahlo obviously knew each other, right? Same circles. Frieda Kahlo is one of Madonna's favorite artists. Okay, she's like big feminist. She also struggled and had a very hard life. And now I'm just jumping from particular artists. As somebody who's done the arts, I sometimes feel it's important to talk about a little bit about art history and the references of where we are today, and where I'm going with this concept of global diaspora. There was always a thing in South Africa that was called the African diaspora, where Okeefe created this whole reconstruction of people from around Africa and meeting in different parts of the world to do shows and exhibits, because there was like that restriction on how art from Africa was perceived. Okeefe came in and changed that and created something called that was called the African diaspora. Not enough people in the States or the world necessarily talk about the African diaspora, but it was 100% there. And he was anti-Marxism. Now, if you know philosophers, Marxism is unfortunately what society is built off of, which is extremely unfortunate, because I personally am with Okeefe. I don't necessarily agree how, like, if you do the research on Plato and all the other philosophers, you can see there were other people that should have been, the theories of society should have been based off of, but I don't know why Marxism was like that thing. So Okeefe said, nope, not interested, this is what we're against. And I'm against it too, because I lived in South Africa and I studied the masters in South Africa. And I researched these particular topics for my master's. Okay, so this is master research stuff. Okay, this is not necessarily high school, junior high, first year, freshman year discussion. This is more after, like, between masters and PhD, or masters into the PhD formats, and how the structure of a larger picture is interpreted, right? This is where I'm coming from. So now we have an artist named Yayoi, and I think everybody knows Yayoi Kusu. I never get her last name right. Yayoi Kusu. My goodness, I had to just Yayoi Kusama. Yayoi Kusama. And she also had a pretty tough life. She came from Japan, had some rough, hard upbringing situations, moved independently to New York, met up with Yoko Ono at some point, but created a letter, sent a letter to Georgia Okeefe. That's like historically researched and documented. And Georgia Okeefe was the introduction for Yayoi to arrive to New York to start her career in the arts as a female artist. So you can see all the feminist artists and the female artists during that time were somehow connected. They were all connected because there were fewer of the women than there were of the men. And so, you know, they had their own personal direction, but they were always also working with each other's perspectives and views and concepts through this kind of vision, right? So that is important to understand. So Yayoi Kusama, who came from Kusamu, keep on getting Kusamu, Yayoi Kusamu was, or still is, I think she's still around, is a Japanese artist who moved to New York, also during the 70s, and she created these art pieces with all these dots. I'm sure a lot of people know that she has pieces in Louis Vuitton bags. Her designs are now used on Louis Vuitton designs. So she wasn't just recognized for these incredibly detailed paintings and installations of dots and imagery, but she was also recognized for the fashion element of things. So that is like another side to this concept, is that the fashion now becomes part of the performance, which is also another interesting thing, because if you go back to Yoko Ono, there was a performance piece that she had created where, I don't think I should talk about it, but you can look it up, where people would come over and she just did this performance piece and people were allowed to, there was clothing connected to it. So I'm not going to bring too much up, but I think you can look it up if you're interested. Let me see if I can't remember the name of it though. Let's just double check. If the information of the, okay, so there's that. Yeah, I don't remember the name of that show. I don't know where I put it. There was a whole performance piece that Yoko Ono had done, which was very feminist for that time, even more so than a lot of the other things. And a lot of artists were recognized as females to do certain things. And Yayoi also did movement performance pieces out in the public, which were kind of radical even for now to have done in history, right? So that like they set the stage for feminism. And I am myself, I'm also a feminist artist. And that is, like, I think it's okay as a female to be able, like, I come from a perspective of being allowed to do more than one thing. You don't have to just paint, like, in an art space to be a creative artist. I believe you can multitask, and which I've done for my exhibitions, that I've multitasked and I've brought projects together with multiple skills because of all the skills that I put together, from music production to video to film to you name it, I do it all. That's what I'm known to do, and you can look on my websites. Okay. So going back into the whole thing of saving money. Saving money comes from acknowledging that you're able to do multiple things. Okay. And having multiple skills enables you to save money because you do not hire people. You no longer need to hire people to do it for you. You now can be self-sufficient. And that's where my feminist comes in. I am a feminist. I will not have a guy tell me what to do. And I will make sure that I learn the skills that I never ever have to ask anybody to do it for me, because I think it's one's own personal strength to not have to ask for help. Okay, that's my approach to how I go about doing things. Is I've never asked Brandon to do any of my sites. I've never asked him once to film my videos. I've never asked him once to join me on any of my shows. He has hardly been to any of my shows. I have everything documented on my own. When I did my master's, I made sure that I documented it from the Goethe Institute, where I organized the project. When I worked on that project, I was invited to do another project with Ballet Theatre Africa by the dance creator, constructor, choreographer Martin Schoenberg for Ballet Theatre Africa. And all of those I have managed to keep together for all of the things that I do right now. It's all documented. I've documented everything. So I have proof of product, right? Proof of product. Even if Brandon wasn't necessarily around my whole entire life or whatever, I still documented my stuff. So this proof of knowledge and skill and understanding how to be self-sufficient comes from the core strength of being a female and refusing to ask for help from a man. Refusing, point blank. I'm not interested in asking a guy to help me because I don't feel, I think we have enough equality and materials and supplies for women to have as equal skills as a man does. And I think all of these artists in the past, as females, were stating the obvious when they experienced what they experienced during the 70s, the 80s, and onwards. Okay. Even before that, fewer females were recognized within the arts because women had no rights, right? There were no rights for women. That was like the whole thing. We have more rights now. One of the other reasons why I moved back to the States is because you have more rights in the United States than you would overseas. You don't have rights in South Africa as a woman. You know, it's not the same. You know, people are always, oh, let's go to Africa. I was like, you guys are not going to make it in Africa. I'll tell you right now, you're going to have to abide by the man's rules there. So that's, and Asia's the same way. Women don't have rights. We have more rights here in the States, but you have to stand your ground and put your position and speak it. Speak it into reality. Don't stop yourself from, don't wait for a guy to do it for you. Do it for you. Do it for yourself. You know, that's, even if you don't get a certificate, learn the skills so you don't have to ask a guy to do it for you. Like, I'm big into, like, learning to do the skills without asking a guy to do anything, because it always turns bad in the end, because then when you leave the guy, and I've had many relationships that have broken up and started over again, trust me, I have experience in life. Life experience. I am so glad I didn't have kids from any of the guys in the past. Thank God that never happened. Okay. I would have had more problems if I ended up having to deal with kids on top of breakups. Just imagine, like, if I had 5 kids from each of the guys that I ended up with, and each guy had another problem. Just imagine the baggage I had to carry in the next relationship. It just doesn't make sense. So you stand your ground, you put your position where you can have the power, and create those skills. Don't wait for a guy. Do it for yourself. Okay? And I know there are a lot of guys on here that are going to be like, oh, I can't believe she's saying this and talk. I was like, listen, I am a feminist, and I will speak it, because I think it is important for women to stick together, to acknowledge the fact that we need to really focus on expanding our skills. The skill expansion is quite serious, hey? I wasn't like everybody else. I didn't finish college or high school and decide to marry a guy. I had relationships, but I didn't stay with the guys in the end, because I wanted to finish studying, learning, educating myself. And I think by doing that, it might have put me out of the margin of where women are, they have their jobs and their lifestyle and their husbands and their kids, where it has become a stigma of somebody of my age who might not necessarily be married or have kids to see it as, like, as somebody from an outside perspective, whereas in fact I was just protecting myself, because I knew from all the other relationships that I had, it was just a no-go. I just wasn't going to put myself in a situation. I just knew better. Okay. So thank God I have enough skills to know that if I need to pack up and leave, if I ever need to pack up and leave, I can start over again and not stress out about needing this, that, and the other, because I know how to put it all together myself. And that's like the moral of the story here is I think people don't talk enough about why the skills matter, especially for women, because women should be held also accountable for their independence, right? It's not just getting a degree, it's learning those skills, like to understand how to make it work for yourself if a guy is not around. Same thing for a guy. Maybe the guy's dependent on the girl because she has skills and he is not equipped. The same thing could apply. Maybe it's just a universal concept, just have the skills to learn, but specifically women, because I think women have been repressed for so long that we tend to forget that it's important to position ourselves where we have a stance for future endeavors, right? So learn those technology skills, learn how to build a website, learn how to film yourself without a guy, learn how to generate money if you are at home stuck with your parents. I'm not stuck with my parents. Okay, I moved out of my parents' house a long time ago. But if you're stuck with your parents, get those skills going so that once you're out of the house, you don't have to depend on that guy to do it for you, right? That's like a thing. It's like a real thing. And I have a lot of other more descriptive discussions I will talk about for these particular artists and others. The moving into the question of MTV and the pop culture. You have BT, which is like another one of my idols. I love BT. He apparently comes from Maryland. I didn't know that until recently. He also studied a little bit, he studied more at Berkeley than I did. I studied a little bit at Berkeley School of Music, School of the Arts, which is opposite the Corcoran. I only just did like a little bit there, and I also studied at in Walt Whitman and Pyle for music, and I was in a band at one point. So like it's just, there are so many connections within the arts, but I still think there are fewer people who are using all those skills within the arts. Like women are always like told, oh, go to a recording studio and have somebody produce. When I taught music with my students and my female singer students, I said, listen guys, ladies, I'm gonna speak to you honestly about world experience. Have your own equipment. Don't depend on a guy to have you produce music in their space. Things can always go wrong. They can try to dismantle your piece when you're not there and you don't give them what they want. They just have, so I think the moral of the story as well is that if you are going to do music production as a woman or sing as a woman, have your equipment. Do not depend on that guy to produce your music. Do it for yourself. Same thing for a website. Don't depend on a guy. Create your own websites and build your sites so you can stand your ground for your own independence. Then you don't have to ask the guy, because I've had friends who've done this. I've had model friends who've always, oh, my boyfriend did this website for me, and then they break up. And then what happens? Oh, I can't get into my website because they have the back. I was like, now that is why you have to learn the skills, because you cannot depend on somebody going in and asking you after you've broken up with the person to learn how to get into the back end of your website. You learn to create the website from start to finish because you want to have control of your site. Same thing applies for the YouTube channel. If you're going to do a YouTube channel, start from the beginning. Learn the back end. Understand how it works. Implement the skills. Don't wait for a guy. And if you're a guy that's dependent, learn the skills as well. Don't wait for the women or whatever it is that you're dealing with. Okay, that is like step number one. So that is my discussion. I was going to do a little bit of AI concepts. Let's see if I can come up with some ideas. So now that I've had a quick discussion on basic artists and conversation on the whys and why you should and shouldn't as females, let's see if I can recreate a Yoko Ono. Okay, so let's just use, create an image. I don't know if I want to create an image. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, we're going to create it from another piece of design. Hold on a second, let me just go into this. So once I've created the images, let's just check this out. Okay, let's do this. Let's use this character. Okay, now that's very interesting. Okay. Okay, recreate. Performance art piece with herself moving. Of the space. White outfits. Okay, let's see what we got here. Okay. So let's see what we can do here. Okay, so I'm going to create 3 images for the 3 particular artists that I kind of just spoke about. We'll do Yoko Ono, Yayoi, and who's the other person? George Okeefe, everybody knows. Frieda Karol, everybody knows. Maybe the collaboration between Ryuichi Sakamoto and the Korean artist named, I still need to talk about South African and African artists later, but I'll discuss that later on. Not today, maybe another day. June Paik. Okay. So I'm not, when you come onto this channel, I'm not one to come on here and entertain in a sense of that concept. Oh gosh. Okay, that did not work. Okay, let's try another one. Let's use this. Okay. What accents? So I think, and then also when you create images and you're doing like the reason why AI would be useful, for instance, on social media, not in all cases. I don't think it's an okay thing to do if there's no purpose. I think it needs to be purposeful and you need to have the why behind why you're doing it, and it has to be original, right? You can't just do, I keep on emphasizing slop art, but the same thing applies for a painting. If you're doing an art piece and you're only using browns and you have no idea how to mix the colors, that painting is going to look muddy and brown. The same thing goes for creating like an AI image. It's just like a canvas with paint. Just like a canvas with paint. And you have to use it as the new Photoshop. For me, it's like a new Photoshop. My music production, I keep my own music production because I have all the equipment. I don't have to I got all the equipment. I do not have to go anywhere for other people to, or I don't have to use other, other AI tools. I mean, other AI tools to create. Okay, this is interesting. So let's just download this. Let's say this is this is the, so Yayoi Kuama, not Yayoi Kuama. Let's just, where did this go? Save. I don't know if I want to save it to file. Just save image, right? Save image, okay, allow. Okay. So I've reconstructed, let's see if I can pull this out. Sorry. Okay, that's fine. Okay. And why this is not, okay. So I just recreated an image, okay? I'm using an image that I had done before, and I'm reconstructing it. I'm creating it into like a character that could have been, say, Yoko Ono when she was younger. And she did like these I don't think she necessarily wore heeled shoes, but she definitely did performance pieces in gallery spaces where she used her voice and her sound to create new expression, almost like a Dada approach, right, to her vision. Okay, so these are the kind of things I'm now going to incorporate probably into video structure. I'm going to do that now. Let me just do a video structure of this. Let's reconstruct this into a video structure format. Let me put it in a prompter, okay. Put it in, and we're going to just put that image in the YouTube create prompter, okay, and this is how I create my movements, is I use another prompter. I don't use the same prompter. I use another prompter to create the image constructed out of multiple layers of ideas and then repurpose that into a moving project or video. So I'm not just going into the prompter and typing blah, 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 make the cow sing and make it purple. Like I'm really thinking about the structure, just like a painting. How are you going to look at this canvas and create this piece? What are you going to do? What colors are you going to use? Those are the kind of things I think about when I'm creating an image. Okay, so I'm using it as an academic analysis over just, oh, it's cool entertainment. Let's do the entertainment. No, I don't do that because I don't believe it has to just be an entertainment valued concept. Okay, so let's, come on. Yeah, allow full access, okay. So we're going to recreate this image. Oh, no, hold on. We're going to not do that. Okay, so it just says, so on the YouTube Studio, no, YouTube Create, generate video. Now it gives you 3 options to create a design. So I'm going to use that image. Let's see what I can come up with. That image. Let's give it a different performance. No, let's just use that image. Okay, so I'm going to use one image for this one, for example. And I'm going to say create, place this character in the space, but have her, oops, a moving performance art piece around the sculptures. And this is important, is I can do this, but if I were to use somebody else's image and get the direct images, people are losing their position on their channels because of the copyright strikes. It doesn't just happen with music. It also happens visually. So if you're using somebody else's image, right, and that image people pick up is not your own, they say, oh, you can use it for educational purposes, but I still wouldn't take the chance. I would then use AI to reconfigure the recreation of whatever it is the image is, and use that for your proof. Okay, I would keep it safe. If you create the AI, and you say, for instance, have the human touch, and you maybe put like, there you go. Okay, so I'm going to reuse that for one of the videos just now. Okay? So that's almost like what she would do. I've sort of recreated like a Yoko Ono approach, but it's not her. Okay, this is an image I just created. So this will now be part of the next vision, right? So we're going to just use this. Okay, and that will be one of the projects. Okay, so I'm going to close that so I don't lose it. And then the music, I would not use that music. I would silence that music, and I would use my own music to put on top of that image. Because that music that was created that way is not necessarily what I stand for. I do not have my music on Spotify and on a lot of other places because I don't agree with what is going on and people extracting sounds from artists and not giving the artist recognition. The best way to control it is not to have them on any of the platforms. I try to keep it on YouTube because I feel like if I do it on a live, it's actually a stamp. I remember when CDs were out and people were trying to find ways to make sure that they qualified that song for themselves, they would send out that CD, and that CD would come back to you, and it was legally approved in like courts if you need to go to courts. That CD was then documented of that track if you were not connected to ASCAP or SAMRO. South Africa, you have SAMRO, and the United States, you have ASCAP. That CD could be used in a court of law to prove that this is indeed yours. So for me, this whole concept of understanding production becomes so important to have your own equipment because that can have the proof and the evidence of the future of your success, of your growth. So that this now becomes the next part. Say for instance, I now edit this video. This video will have this edited documentation of this particular AI image that I created from various other images that I've constructed. Delete the sound, use my sound on top of it, and then put my own logo on it. Okay, that's what I'm doing now because now I'm protecting my asset. Okay, that is important. Protecting your own assets also matters on social media. Just like everybody who uses other people's things and that person finds out that you're using it, they will take it down. So by understanding both the art side, the visual side, and the music side, I have managed to keep my channel completely safe. I have no copyright strikes. Even after all these 1,300 videos, no copyright strikes. Why? Because from day one, I already knew the rules of the arts, and I already knew the rules of the music, and I said, listen, if these are the rules, this is how it's going to have to come together on social media. And I obviously proved myself right that this is indeed the reality of things. So that is the whole concept, right? That is the whole point of this concept, is that this becomes now I wish I could expand this so you can see that. Yeah, that I can definitely use. So I might do another version of that. Okay, now let's move into the question of Yayoi Kuama. So the same thing. I'm going to go back into my other format. Create another image. So these images will now be part of the video that I'm going to be, like this side. I have one side that is the vertical, and then the other side is a landscape, and the landscape is constantly used to edit and readjust the video. So I have both. I'm not separating them because as somebody who studied the arts, we know that documentation is the most important part of the process, right? You have to document it to have proof. And now I'm doubling up my proof format. Okay. So let's go into this. Okay, now we're going to create another image. Oops. Create. Let's go into something that looks like a bit of a pumpkin. See if I can find an image that has a similar polka dot thing that I've done in the past. Oops, gosh. This is like interesting. It gets kind of tricky. Let's use this apple. Okay, this is a good example. No, hold on. Okay, let's do this. I have images of a room with flowers. So now I'm going to shift this idea. So this is my first idea, okay? I'm going to use this idea that I came up with before. I'm going to recreate this into another image, okay? Okay, create this space with red and yellow. Polka dots. Oh, I'm spelling. Oh, gosh, with dots all over a white room and pumpkins. Pumpkin. Pumpkin. Gosh, this is like so interesting. I'm using it. Sculptures with, goodness gracious. With dots too. Dots all over them. Over them too. Okay, let's see. No person. No person in the space. Whoops. No person should be. Okay, let's see if that comes up with something. Okay, so I'm always layering on top of things that I've already reconstructed for other purposes. I never waste images. That's one of the things that I pride myself in, is I always recycle. Like even AI images, I always recycle them in a different format. And AI is good if you're doing like research, like I said, and you're doing social media and something like this. You cannot show a book, or you can show a book technically, but you cannot go on to the site and download an image from somebody else's page and then claim that to be yours, because that will be written down as copyright strike. So the best way to reconstruct it is in your own imaginary concepts and repurpose it from creating the AI image. But you're much more safer to do it that way visually than you are because I understand the methods of, I studied the arts, formally arts, like I studied the arts, okay? Like I have degrees in the arts. So I understand visually that there are things you can't do and things you can't do on an academic level and also on a there we go. Here we go. Technically speaking, let's just imagine that this is her Yayoi Kuama's type of idea. She is known for the art of creating polka dots all over a space, and the imagery. This is not her piece. This is an AI reinterpretation of what she had constructed. This is just one out of thousands ideas, but she uses dots to recreate her experience as what she sees on a daily basis. So she has chronic issues, and she is reconstructing her life and experience through her imagination and displaying it in public, and she is now recognized for these incredible pieces. Just like her focus on consistency and formal spaces, like spaces transformed into new sculptural image design, decoration, interior decor. She does it all. And she was also recognized to be somebody who created design and fashion. So she's in between like boundaries, right? Okay, so this image, we're going to use this image. Now we're going to make the image move. Okay, save image. We're going to go back into, I mean, there is a way to do it. I just like to mix up the formats because I don't think that sticking to one is the right approach. Okay, so now we're going to create a new one. Oh, actually, technically we can, no, let's do a new one. Oh my gosh. Okay, so now we're going to create a new one. And we're going to use the polka dots. Oops, no, we're not going to do it that way. Generate video, bring the image to the video format of the generator. Now you create the image. Okay, so create the space in a way it looks like a person is going in to observe the space. And the more detailed you are with your descriptions, the more detailed your pieces will be. Okay, this is coming from somebody who actually taught art. I teach art. I teach art as well. So as an art teacher, I'm talking about AI in a form of art education, and it's a technical thing. You can't just randomly put create a cat that flies. That's going to give you, I don't know. It's not going to be cool and interesting. Let's put it that way. You want to be more specific, right? Be more specific. Let's see what it comes up with. If I do that, I don't know, but if I don't like it, I can go back and re-edit. These particular examples I will then use for, once again, this video that I'm going to do. So it's just the technical side. You don't want it to be, the safest thing you can do is to create the AI, because on social media, at least you have a little bit more lenience if you create it and they see you creating it versus taking it from, and I don't even recommend using celebrities' faces. If you're going to do AI, I don't think, like say for instance, you say, oh, I want to create Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt. Like, I don't think that's a good idea. I think that in the end, those people that are, okay, so this is what we came up with. So that is what the space looks like when you, for instance, experience it moving in and out of the space. So that will be the example I will use for Yayoi Kuama. Okay, it's not perfect. She had far more intricate sculptural pieces, but it's an example. And you don't want it to be exact, because then it's no longer something you created from your own inspirational image. It is something now taken from somebody else's piece and then recognized on social media as not yours, but the original creator who created the first identity of the vision. So I'm not trying to recreate theirs. So sometimes you'll see me bringing in images, and I do write AI. I want to make sure that some people know that AI has been used. I don't know in the case like this, I'm not technically using it on the live. Like if I were to put it on the screen and I had the AI on the image and you were watching me use the screen in the background, then I would say AI for this. Once I add this image into the video and I edit it, then I have to incorporate that into the AI. So I don't think it needs to be discussed necessarily like from this angle. I'm creating it, but I'm not doing it from the screen's perspective. Okay, so that's what we're doing now. So that's another good example of use this one. Yeah, use this, that's fine. Okay, so now I have another image. So we have 2 images of 2 artists. Great. Let me just double check. Yeah, I have 2 images of 2 artists I can now incorporate into my next video. I think that's it for now. I think it was important for me to bring this up. I might have started earlier than I usually would, but I think I've basically gotten to the point. I wanted to incorporate the artists that are not necessarily as recognized. They are recognized, but they're always misunderstood, right? People are always misunderstanding. People want, when you're doing vocals or sound, you want something that's more understanding. People understand sounds they recognize. If it's a sound that you don't recognize as an uncomfortable sound, people are going to shun it. And Yoko Ono was a good example of that unconformed, non-Western sound to her music. She's acclaimed as her own artist, but she balances between the arts, performance art, and then sound performance art. So there's a performance art that is visual, like with visual performance art where you like movements and all these kind of things in a space. And then another performance art perspective, she's like the Dada performance art. She's like the start of where performance art really kind of took off, right? And then another performance art that people recognize as vocal performances or live performances, people call that performance art as well. So there are 2 perspectives of how performance art can play out. One of them could be the artistic creative side, and then the other could be the more formally trained performance art. So there's always a misunderstanding, right? So that was like the whole thing. Okay, so I think I've done what I had to do. I discussed the basics, how I met Paul McCartney at the Corcoran in 2002 or 2001. I think it was 2002. Could have been 2001, I can't remember exactly. And how I called Paul Simon, because I had met Paul Simon in Japan in 1980-something in my parents' house. So there's like a whole connection and then the projects in between. That's it for today, folks. Thanks for popping over. I am a little bit more of an academic. I studied the masters. I think a little bit more masters. I use social media in a little bit of a different way, sort of like an artist uses a different type of medium for a different type of purpose. I guess I use YouTube a little bit differently than other people, but I think that is partly because I'm an artist. I just see it differently. And as women, I like to enforce, be your own advocates. Stand your own ground, learn the skills. Don't expect a guy to do it for you. Do it for yourself. And that is something I learned because I never wanted to be in a situation like my friends had, having to ask their exes to go in and redo their websites because they don't have the codes to get in. Like, that is just so, like, why? Why would you do that? Carry it with you always. Have control of your spaces at all times. Okay, folks, have a wonderful day. Once again, have a great day. Thank you.